Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, for our purposes, Thursday, June 12th, 2025. Time to get another show on the road, and I am on the road. And by the way, I don't know if I ever spilled the beans on where I was going, but for operational security purposes, don't tell anybody, I'm making my first visit to the U.S. Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. So it's an exciting time. And time now, though, to bring you some pre-recorded stuff that I hope will still be relevant. I know it's a crazy time. I have no idea whether this is going to hold up all the way through Wednesday of next week, but you'll have new material to hang out with and commiserate with in the morning regardless. I've tried to keep this somewhat thematic. It's a little more difficult to do ahead of time and in bits and pieces, but this is sort of a military bent to today's thing. I've finally taken up the challenge to bring us up to date, up to speed on what's happening with Pete Hegseth and his job security, if any, and exactly what they're investigating over there and who's doing it or not doing it. And then I've got a couple other stories that play on the military theme that I hope will hold together and bring you through today's show. And of course, we'll see what we have in store for you in the coming days. But why don't we get right to it and drop in the first recording on what Pete Hegseth is up to. I want to spend a little time today catching up on something I've been threatening to catch up on for some time now. Pete Hegseth and his precarious situation, although many people just say there's just no way Trump is ever going to part ways with him. But, you know, we've seen him part ways with people he was never going to part ways with before. But Pete Hegseth's situation at the Pentagon, there's been just so much additional reporting on how terrible and how dumb things he's gotten himself mixed up in are, both post-Signalgate and other things. And I have a couple of stories, and I thought maybe we would string them all together and get a more complete picture of the baffling mess that Pete Hegseth is. I'll start where? How about with the Washington Post piece here from May 27th, one of the longer pieces about what's going on there. And the title of this piece, Within Pete Hegseth's Divided Inner Circle, a Cold War Endures. That's scare-quoted Cold War. At the Pentagon, personality conflicts persist and inexperience reigns, fueling internal speculation about the defense secretary's long-term viability in Trump's cabinet. And I believe this was reported after news broke, and we, I think, made mention of it on the show, but I think we had to give it short shrift just to get it in under the wire one of those days when we did mention it, which was the weird upshot of internal reporting and internal recriminations and investigations about both Signalgate and just other alleged leaks to the media, which have, as a result, left Hegseth with like no inner circle of senior staffers. And he's operating now without a chief of staff. And he was never able to keep his head above water in his job to begin with, and to do so without a chief of staff, and to do so with low-level military aides that he just personally liked and promoted to these jobs, leapfrogging over everyone in a very rank-conscious institution like the military. And I think somebody actually makes reference to that in one of these stories. That's all in the background. So now kind of catching up by going back to May 27th. And let's give credit for the writing. This is Dan Lemothe. I'm hoping I got that name right. Lamothe. I don't think I've run into Dan before, but let's make ourselves glad that we did by reading his article. An enduring rift among Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's cadre of senior advisors has divided the Pentagon's front office and fueled internal speculation about his long-term viability in the cabinet post after several episodes that attracted White House scrutiny, according to numerous people familiar with the matter. The conflict within Hegseth's inner circle persists even after he purged several political appointees in April and after attempts to portray a sense of unity among his remaining brain trust. So that takes you back. They link the articles, and this I don't know if we read this specific one, but this catches you up again, like we were saying, on what happened. This is a Washington Post piece, also from Dan Lamoth, and April 16th. Hegseth suspends 3 senior political aides amid leak inquiry. The abrupt personnel shakeup has roiled the Pentagon's inner sanctum and left other officials wondering who else could be targeted. And you remember who we were talking about? 3 senior aides to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, all political appointees, have been suspended amid a Pentagon inquiry into the apparent leak of sensitive information, defense officials said. Dan Caldwell, senior advisor to Hegseth, Darren Selnick, the Secretary's Deputy Chief of Staff, and Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to Deputy Defense Secretary Stephen Feinberg, all removed from the Pentagon that week, officials said, on condition of anonymity, of course. And one official saying that it appeared Caldwell and Selnick would be the only government officials targeted in an inquiry for now, but then Carroll joined the list the following day. All very weird and mysterious, and we probably could just have started there just as a refresher, but I think we can kind of fast forward. You're probably aware of those. I just want to put those names on the record again as we run through Lamoth's follow-up piece from the end of May. Okay, so the conflict in Hegseth's inner circle persists even after he purged several political appointees a month prior. And attempts to portray a sense of unity among his remaining brain trust is what they're working on. His claims, however, are belied by continued behind-the-scenes dysfunction, brought on by unresolved personality conflicts, inexperience, vacancies in key leadership roles, and a steady-state paranoia over what political crisis could emerge next, current and former officials said. They described the situation on the condition of anonymity, of course, because of its sensitivity and fear of retaliation. It should all just be assumed when they say anonymity is invoked here. There's a Cold War that exists in between flashpoints, said one person, recounting numerous instances when tempers have flared among key figures on the secretary's team. It's unsettling at times. Perhaps the most combustible relationship among Hegseth's aides is that of Eric Geressy, or maybe Geressy, I don't know, Geressy, Eric Geressy, we'll say, and Ricky Buria, Buria. That, according to several people familiar with the matter, Geressy, a retired soldier with whom Hegseth has credited with mentoring him when they served together in Iraq, has voiced repeated concerns that Buria, until recently a military assistant to the defense secretary, has sought, which is him, of course, has sought to marginalize colleagues to boost his own standing within the Trump administration, these people said. The tension boiled over in March when Geressy, whoever it is, learned that he had been excluded from joining some of Hegseth's meetings during a multi-day trip across the Pacific. He blamed Buria for the perceived slight and told colleagues that he had upbraided the Marine Corps colonel during the trip. According to people familiar with their standoff, the clash occurred just after The Atlantic revealed that its top editor had, of course, been accidentally included in a group chat in which several top Trump administration officials, including Hegseth, coordinated a bombing campaign in Yemen on the unclassified app Signal. Geressy, gosh, I really have to settle on one of these things, confided to colleagues that he was troubled by how administration officials were using the free messaging platform, as were, most normal Americans. Geressy also has voiced disgust about complaints emerging from the White House. He told fellow Pentagon staff members that military aides working closely with President Donald Trump's inner sanctum have come to view Buria as self-important and quick to Bigfoot others to get more time with Hegseth and other senior administration officials. Geressy and Buria did not respond to several requests for comment. And here is, I guess we get some idea of who we're talking about here. A picture of Geressy here. Hegseth applauds longtime friend Eric Geressy upon presenting him with the Distinguished Service Cross for battlefield exploits years earlier. during a Pentagon ceremony in March. So I guess one of the things that Hegseth took care of for his pal upon landing at the secretary's desk is awarding him the Distinguished Service Cross 20 years after the fact. But, I got no idea whether the guy deserves it or not. So, okay. Friction between the two senior advisors remains palpable, those familiar with the situation say, and it is emblematic of the instability that reigns at the Pentagon as Hegseth attempts to regain his footing after several scandals that irked the White House, alarmed Congress, and left the former Fox News personality on the defensive. At the outset of his Memorial Day address on Monday, the president said the defense secretary has, quote, and it is Trump, so devoted his life to service members and veterans and is really doing well, while acknowledging that he went through it a lot. Very eloquent. He's a tough cookie, Trump said. That's what we want, is a tough cookie. That's what you want at the head of the Pentagon. Cookies. Correct. But current and former defense officials who have witnessed the upheaval say it is unclear how long the polarizing defense secretary can survive in his role without imposing order on his own staff. Emulating the boss, I would say, there definitely disorder in the staff, and he probably thinks, well, that's the way Trump does it, so I can get away with it too, or it might even be what Trump wants me to do. But very rarely the case. Trump is singular and unique in that and doesn't afford anybody else the same flexibility, if that's what it is. This account of Hegseth's attempt to reset his team is based on interviews with 7 current and former U.S. officials with knowledge of the fraught dynamic that has taken hold at the Defense Department under his stewardship. Sean Parnell, a senior advisor and chief spokesman for Hegseth, minimized the tension. That's his job, of course, saying in a statement to the Washington Post that, quote, workforce adjustments are a natural and necessary feature of any highly effective organization. There are also, as it happens, workforce adjustments are a natural and necessary feature of a terrible organization as well. But, you hope that a highly effective organization will handle them better. Now, they haven't handled them well, so it's probably more of an indication of a terrible organization, but workforce adjustments are a part of every organization, good and bad, but never mind that. The Defense Secretary, Parnell said, is committed to ensuring the Department of Defense has the right people in the right positions to execute President Trump's agenda. I don't know why I read it that way, but okay. I just got excited. I saw them say they were going to execute President Trump, but it's his agenda they're going to execute. Parnell dismissed the significance of disagreements within Hegseth's staff, saying that Americans outside Washington don't care about palace intrigue or sensationalized mainstream media gossip, except that they, just recently spent the whole day talking about that, as between Trump and Musk. Oh, they care about action. Hegseth's team, he said, is working in unison to focus the Defense Department on its core mission of, his favorite stuff, warfighting, and to deliver results. Personality clash is the next section investigated here. The clash between Garrissey and the 2 pronunciations of his name, and Buria, who might also have 2 pronunciations of his name, which has not been previously detailed, is seen as especially notable in the Pentagon given their backgrounds and Hegseth's frequent claim that he wants to bring a warrior ethos? I don't know. To the Pentagon. I really should have studied this article first and figured out the pronunciations. Garrissey, a retired command sergeant major, was a no-nonsense first sergeant and enlisted advisor to Hegseth during their Iraq deployment from 2005 to 2006 and has been praised by the defense secretary for his leadership under fire. In March, Hegseth upgraded a Silver Star award that Garrissey received for combat valor to the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor in the hierarchy of military decorations recognizing battlefield bravery. During a ceremony at the Pentagon lauding Garrissey, Hegseth said the retired soldier had, quote, changed my life and now works right down the hall from me. And that's exactly the kind of voice we need. Since joining the Trump administration, Garrissey has run a little-known organization called the Joint Service Interagency Advisory Group. Anyway, that includes numerous special operations troops and representation from other government agencies. A core focus of the group has been how to counter Mexican drug cartels. That's why you join Special Ops, everybody. To fight Mexican drug cartels. Two people familiar with the matter said, highly sensitive subjects, of course, that has exacerbated the uneasiness between Trump and his counterpart in Mexico City, President Claudia Sheinbaum. A third person said the group's work had been coordinated with the Mexican government. Buria, who was a pilot in the Marine Corps before moving to the Pentagon, has a good relationship with Hegseth that bloomed more recently. He served as a junior military aide, a body man for President Joe Biden's Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and was held over by Hegseth at the outset of the Trump administration. Such nonpartisan roles often bridge administrations. So I guess when we mentioned that he was an aide to the Defense Secretary earlier in the story, and I assumed that was Hegseth, but I guess it could have been either one of them, or in fact both. Buria's responsibilities and power quickly expanded when in February he temporarily took on the role of a 3-star general. Really, colonel to 3-star general, sure. After Hegseth fired his senior military assistant, Lieutenant General Jennifer Short, without disclosing any reason. But the answer is right there, Jennifer. There you go. Now we figured it out. Hegseth has removed several top military leaders, including a disproportionate number of women, since his arrival at the Pentagon in January. But you may recall, of course, Hegseth promised everybody that he was going to give up drinking while he was defense secretary. And he probably also said, I should probably also give up sexual harassment and rape as well. And best way to do that is fire all the women, as opposed to, effing control yourself. Hegseth's decision to temporarily elevate Buria and Buria's handling of his newfound clout with the secretary irritated numerous senior military officers in the building, people familiar with the matter said. As the temporary assignment came to a close, rather than return to his role as a junior military assistant, Buria submitted a request to retire from the Marine Corps and became a senior civilian advisor to the defense secretary. Among those who have advocated for Buria is Hegseth's wife, Jennifer, also a Jennifer. And maybe he just needed to get rid of all Jennifers, because you never know what's going to happen. If you have a couple drinks and one Jennifer is as good as another, I guess. But among those who have advocated for Buria is Hegseth's wife, who has fulfilled an unofficial and unorthodox role shaping Pentagon affairs that has unnerved defense officials. Yeah, so I'm thinking back about this, the weird request that he makes here to retire from the military rather than return to his role as a junior military assistant and then join the Pentagon as a senior civilian advisor. And I guess what happens there is this is the Marine Corps colonel who suddenly dropped into a role usually reserved for a lieutenant general, 3-star general, and then bosses everybody around, including presumably 1 and 2-star, and maybe a couple of 3-star generals from a colonel's rank, and then says, oh, wait a minute, you telling me you're going to return me to the ranks now, even as a colonel? I prefer to resign rather than let those people who outrank me, who I bullied, get their revenge on me when I have to sit there as a colonel and take it. Let me out. Around that time, Hegseth fired 3 senior defense officials, all political appointees that he accused of leaking sensitive information to the news media. Shortly after their removal, the 3, Dan Caldwell, Darren Selnick, and Colin Carroll, issued a scathing statement saying they had been slandered and that the claims leveled against them were baseless. I don't know whether I can believe any of these guys, though. I'm not sure which one's telling the truth. Hegseth's first chief of staff, Joe Casper, also departed his role in April as Pentagon officials privately questioned his ability to keep the front office organized and manage disputes among aides. Casper left on good terms with Hegseth, the defense secretary has said. Maybe. Hegseth then moved to have Buria installed as his chief of staff. Other Republicans appealed to the White House to prevent that from happening, citing Buria's warm relationships with officials in the Biden administration. People familiar with the matter said that's interesting. So they were opposed to him not because he was a swell-headed jackass, but because, maybe we can get Trump. Maybe it wasn't really their objection, but they thought they might be able to get Trump to stop it by pointing out that he was friends with officials from the Biden administration. But it didn't work because Trump loves Hegseth because he used to be on TV, And Hegseth said, I want this guy. And Hegseth insisted that he wanted that guy because his wife said, you need to insist that we want that guy. That's weird. Anyway, despite the concerns of some administration officials, Buria is functioning for now, at least as of late May, as acting chief of staff. He was the chief of staff, these people said, and is increasingly frustrated that the White House doesn't appear to be willing to allow him to do the job permanently. But they don't want anybody doing jobs permanently. It is unclear whether the Trump administration intends to appoint someone else to do the job. No deputy chief of staff has been announced since the firing of Selnick, who held the job last. Anna Kelly, a White House spokeswoman, declined to answer direct questions about who will fill the chief of staff and deputy chief of staff jobs at the Pentagon long term, and whether the White House may send another appointee or two to do so. While Marco Rubio, for instance, both jobs. Go ahead. While the media is focused on gossip, President Trump is confident in the secretary's ability to ensure top leadership at the Department of Defense shares their focus on restoring a military that is focused on readiness, lethality, and excellence, Kelly said. And the lethality that was supposed to be to the other guys. But instead, it's his staff. On Sunday, Trump was asked about Buria and a report that he had badmouthed Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance on occasion, a detail reported by the New York Post. The Post has not independently verified that reporting, though they did publish it. Trump said that he has no idea who Buria is, but I would recommend that we don't take him if the reporting is true. I'll take a look, Trump said. Buria, I'll check it out. Well, see where that went. Garrissey has become so frustrated by the chaos engulfing the front office that he has openly contemplated resigning, officials said. A detail CNN first reported in April. He has stayed on so far out of loyalty to the Hegseth and the team he has working for him, several people said. I think that would be a bad look to drop in, get yourself the Distinguished Service Cross, and then quit service. But, maybe that's what's driving part of it. Next section, new blood. And they love blood over there. The feud between Jersey and Buria has persisted as Hegseth attempts to demonstrate that he can find replacements for the advisors he pushed out who have otherwise departed. Okay. Wink, wink. Last month, after the aftermath of the firings, the Pentagon announced the appointment of Buria and 3 others to senior advisor roles. The choices surprised some Pentagon officials, several people said, considering each person's background. Among those named to a senior advisory role was Parnell, an Army veteran and longtime friend of Hegseth who ran unsuccessfully for a U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. The move has increased the workload he already has as Hegseth's primary spokesman and manager of the Pentagon's sprawling public affairs operation, though Parnell has held just one news briefing on March 17th since joining Hegseth's staff, and none since Hegseth has faced scrutiny for the Signal group chat and other turmoil. So maybe he's not all that busy after all. Or at least he's not busy with the things he's supposed to be busy with. Parnell said during that briefing that he wanted to follow through on Hegseth's vision to make this the most transparent Department of Defense in history. But he and other senior Pentagon officials have failed to do so. Beyond the absence of routine news conferences, Hegseth has pointedly shunned interviews with much of the mainstream media, favoring instead interviews with his former colleagues and personal friends at Fox News. Who could have predicted that? Officials familiar with the matter say that Parnell has told numerous colleagues that he wants to begin briefing again, but defense officials collectively decided to wait until at least June, after Hegseth returns to Capitol Hill for hearings about the Pentagon's budget request. He is widely expected to face a hostile reception from Democrats who have expressed incredulity over his judgment since being confirmed in January. The hearings are certain to be televised too, meaning Trump will probably be scrutinizing his answers, people familiar with the matter said. Kingsley Wilson. And here I guess maybe they're saying, well, let's hold off on having Hegseth's choice for spokesperson speak at press briefings until we find out whether Hegseth is going to be fired or not, all the way to June. Kingsley Wilson, an acting Pentagon press secretary, said in a statement that since becoming senior advisor to Hegseth, Parnell has increased his involvement in Defense Department operations, recruitment, acquisitions, and foreign negotiations, in addition to his spokesman duties, which he's not actually doing. Hegseth said last week that Parnell will also oversee a new, oh my God, give him more work, a new review of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which remains a hotly contested political subject nearly 4 years later. It is not hotly contested. Of course, it's hotly yelled about by one group of people, Republicans, and everybody else is like, yeah, it's over. But who knows? Maybe Jake Tapper will write a book about that too. Wilson said Hegseth's office has begun onboarding additional political appointees to assist with Mr. Parnell's expanded portfolio. She did not elaborate. Yeah, what I think to hand, I mean, that's a pretty specialized kind of investigation. Has Sean Parnell got any grounding in that whatsoever? I don't know. Hegseth has also cracked down on media access in the Pentagon, issuing a memo just ahead of Memorial Day weekend that said reporters were allowed to roam too freely and would now require government escorts in most of the building. He cast the move as an effort to protect national security. The Pentagon Press Association, which includes dozens of journalists credentialed in the building, including from the Washington Post, issued a statement decrying the move. Credentialed journalists for decades have had access to unclassified sections of the Pentagon where tourists, custodial staff members, and foreign military visitors are also commonly present. There's no way to sugarcoat it, the statement said. Today's memo by Secretary Hegseth appears to be a direct attack on freedom of the press and America's right to know what its military is doing, or at least what its custodial staff members, tourists, and foreign military visitors are doing. But seriously, why restrict that? On Friday, Parnell also said that Wilson will become the next Pentagon press secretary. I guess so he's ready to move out of that job, thinking he's got another one elsewhere. Since joining the administration, she has been dogged by scrutiny of her past commentary on social media, including a claim she made just last year, in case you were thinking she's just some innocuous person occupying the deputy position. She made last year comments on the Great Replacement theory, which baselessly posits that there's an organized plan to overwhelm predominantly Western countries, that is to say white, with immigrants. It's not a right-wing conspiracy theory, she said. It's reality. Oh, well. Wilson, who has also drawn backlash for a social media post attacking Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, calling him an, quote, entitled midget, and for insisting that Leo Frank, a Jewish man who was lynched by a mob in 1915, had, as she claimed, quote, raped and murdered a 13-year-old girl. He was later pardoned, and historians generally believe he was the victim of anti-Semitism, as opposed to the actual perpetrator of an attack. She has not responded to questions about her past comments, which have been denounced by the Anti-Defamation League and the American Jewish Committee, one of the few things the Anti-Defamation League has been doing of late. Two others who have also recently joined Hegseth's inner circle as senior advisors, Justin Fulker and Patrick Weaver, come to their jobs with a shortfall of relevant experience. That's a phrase. People familiar with the matter said. Fulker, 32, was part of billionaire Elon Musk's U.S. Dodgy service, which has sought to drastically slash government spending and flatten the federal workforce. Interesting, flatten. After he had a falling out with dodgy colleagues in the Pentagon, Hegseth's team gave him workspace and then rapidly promoted him after Hegseth's staff purge, said people familiar with the matter. Fulker is a computer programmer. In 2012, what are we doing with him? He's a senior advisor. In 2012, after dropping out of college, he co-founded, as everyone does, Ring MD, a startup telehealth company in Singapore. After a dispute with investors, that's odd, the company declared bankruptcy and restructured in 2018, a development previously reported by Forbes. Fulker, who did not respond to a request for comment, said in a recently uploaded podcast episode, that's what he needs to be doing as a senior Pentagon advisor, podcast, that the crisis at his company was trying. He attributed the dispute to a disagreement over whether to charge users in the developing world for Ring MD's service. I see. Many were receiving health care for the first time, he said. Fulker sold the majority stake in the company before shifting to public service. He said, though he did not explain or explicitly mention his work for Dodgy or at the Pentagon, Weaver, the other name, 32, has worked as an aide for Republican Representatives Dan Bishop of North Carolina. What was he just in the news for? He said something completely outrageous, and I can't remember just which insane statement it was, but it was, one of those baffling things like, wow, you really believe that? That's nuts. And Brandon Williams from New York, another of his former bosses, and served as an aide in the first Trump administration on the White House's National Security Council and in the Department of Homeland Security. He's seen as a loyal and diligent, but unlikely to take a leadership role within the Pentagon's front office. People familiar with the issue said. He also did not respond, of course, to requests for comment. I'm very curious now, though, whether or not I can quickly find the reference from Bishop or to Bishop. He was the guy who said of the arrest of Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ras Baraka, not that long ago, that members of Congress and the mayor of Newark committed an insurrection at a federal detention facility in New Jersey, and it was worse than 9/11. I mean, okay, that's the kind of cuckoo level guy we're talking about who Weaver worked for before showing up at the Pentagon somehow. Hegseth said in a recent interview on Fox News with a friend and former colleague, Will Cain, that he, quote, very much feels that he has the right team around him. Personnel are going to change, he said. You learned some things. We made some changes, no doubt. Well, no one's disagreeing with that. You did make changes. Hegseth characterizes the scrutiny of his actions and judgment as being part of a broader plot to undermine Trump. Well, that definitely deserves dramatic music. Because I support him fully and I'm willing to be strong and bold in that proclamation, they're going to come at me in any way possible, he said. To do that, or to that, I say, bring it on. Well, it's being brought on. I mentioned that there's a couple other things that might be of interest to add to sort of fill out the picture of Pete Hegseth and what's going on. Let me jump back into Pocket and grab one of the other pieces from around that time. This one, Hugo Lowell for The Guardian, again, back on, what are we talking about, May 27th, that I guess is just The Guardian's take on the same story. White House stunned as Hegseth inquiry brings up. Oh, no, this is a totally different story. Okay. I just happened to notice that the subheader is about the shift, I guess, in personnel. But White House stunned as Hegseth inquiry brings up illegal wiretap claims. Exclusive, they say, so it can't be the same story. Trump advisors lose confidence in Pentagon leak investigation that Hegseth used to justify firing 3 top aides. Okay, so this is a twist on the story that Hegseth provided about why those 3 were dismissed. I forgot about that being the vector for introducing this wiretap business. The White House has lost confidence in a Pentagon leak investigation, not Pete Hegseth himself, but the leak investigation that Hegseth used to justify firing 3 top aides last month after advisors were told the aides had supposedly been outed by an illegal, warrantless National Security Agency wiretap. Wow, that is kind of weird, too. And, yeah, talk about tiptoeing around the issue. Well, we haven't lost confidence in Pete Hegseth. We've lost confidence in the report that Hegseth used, which was a bad idea for him to use, right? No. That he used to fire the aides. Why? Because it revealed that there was an illegal NSA wiretap. And now if you tell me that the NSA wiretap was requested by Hegseth and they still refuse to say they've lost confidence in Hegseth, I don't know what to tell you. The extraordinary explanation alarmed the advisors, who also raised it with people close to J.D. Vance, because such a wiretap would almost certainly be unconstitutional. Oh, no, not that. And an even bigger scandal than a number of leaks. But the advisors found the claim to be untrue and complained that they were being fed dubious information by Hegseth's personal lawyer, Tim Parlatore. I know we've heard that name before, who had been tasked with overseeing the investigation. The episode, as recounted by 4 people familiar with the matter, marked the most extraordinary twist in the investigation examining the leak of an allegedly top-secret document that outlined options for the U.S. military to reclaim the Panama Canal to a reporter. So again, this is not Signalgate, not the leak of the information about the strike in Yemen, but a leak of information about a memo of U.S. military options to reclaim the Panama Canal. Wow. The advisors were stunned again when Parlatore denied having told anyone about an illegal NSA wiretap himself and maintained that any information he had was passed on to him by others at the Pentagon. But did you then pass it on to others? That's not going to get you off the hook. And by the way, we didn't lose confidence in Pete Hegseth. We lost confidence in the report that he relied on. Why do we lose confidence in the report that he relied on? Because the report said there was an illegal wiretap from the NSA. Did we lose confidence in the report because it was based on an illegal wiretap? No. We lost confidence in the report because now we think the guy who told us that there was an illegal wiretap might have been lying to us about the illegal wiretap. Doesn't that make the report stronger? No, not really. It just makes us doubt Tim Parlatore more. But wow. So we now say, we're trying to say we still support Hegseth because Trump still says he supports Hegseth. So we have to say that. We support Hegseth despite the fact that he's produced a report that, 1, says he leaked yet another war plan to somebody, 2, used an illegal NSA wiretap to find out who leaked that information, but may also have been lying about that wiretap. And 3, well, really, we just don't like the report that he used, but we still love him a whole lot. What? I don't even understand this. The advisors, oh yes, so we read this, but the leak was first attributed internally to Hegseth's senior advisor, Dan Caldwell, who was escorted out of the Pentagon and fired last month, that back in April, alongside 2 other aides, Hegseth's former Deputy Chief of Staff, Darren Selnick, and the Deputy Defense Secretary's Chief of Staff, Colin Carroll. But the illegal wiretap claim and Caldwell's denials fueled a breakdown in trust between the Pentagon and the White House, where the Trump advisors tracking the investigation have privately suggested they no longer have any idea about who or what to believe. So I guess it's not just me that's confused by all that. Now, by the way, is this giving us a slightly different version of Dan Caldwell's dismissal? It sounded to me like the other 2 were fired and then Caldwell was kind of like, I don't know, if not fired, asked if he, wanted to leave or whatever. But then this one reports him as having been escorted out of the building. But I'd have to go back and find the mention of how Caldwell was handled, and I'm not sure whether that was in the article that we just read or the article that it referenced earlier. I feel like that might have been it. Dan Caldwell. Here's the first mention of them. Oh, then they did say it appeared Caldwell and Selnick would be the only ones targeted, but then it was Colin Carroll, who joined the list later. So, all right, no denial that he was fired or escorted out of the building. After all, I just mixed up the names there. Okay, so wow, and we left off with this kind of bombshell. The illegal wiretap claim and Caldwell's denials fueled this breakdown in trust, and now Trump advisors have no idea who or what to believe. In particular, one Trump advisor recently told Hegseth that he did not think Caldwell or any of the fired aides had leaked anything, and that he suspected the investigation had been used to get rid of aides involved in the infighting with his first chief of staff, Joe Casper, even though Joe Casper was already gone. Weird. The fraught situation is sure to increase pressure on Hegseth ahead of a Senate hearing next month, right? Previously mentioned. And more broadly, for his office, which has been roiled by the leak investigation that has now continued for nearly a month with no new evidence or any referral to the FBI. How interesting is that? We'll just figure it out ourselves. Don't worry about it. The fallout has left Hegseth with no chief or deputy chief of staff as he relies on 6 senior advisors to run his front office, which is involved in, as you may know, running the Pentagon, but setting the direction of the Defense Department that has a budget of nearly $1 trillion and oversees more than 2 million troops. But what the hell, right? And while Hegseth's former junior military aide, Ricky Buria, has in effect assumed the job of chief of staff, the White House has blocked Hegseth from giving him the job permanently on account of his limited experience and role in internal office drama. The Pentagon declined to comment on reporting for this story. A spokesperson for the White House said in a statement, quote, President Trump is confident in the secretary's ability to ensure top leadership of the Department of Defense shares their focus on restoring a military that is focused on readiness, lethality, and excellence. Oh, well. White House spurred by rumors is the next section here. The skepticism among the Trump advisors is widely seen as a product of several developments that started shortly after the suspensions of Caldwell and Selnick on April 15th, followed by the suspension of Carroll on April 16th, according to 7 people familiar with the matter. 7. After the aides were fired on April 18th and issued a joint statement denying wrongdoing, the White House received its first briefings on the firings. At that juncture, a handful of Trump advisors in the West Wing and elsewhere were told there was evidence that Caldwell had printed a document on U.S. military plans for the Panama Canal, classified at the top secret level, took a photo, and sent it to a reporter using his personal phone. What a death wish. But the advisors grew uneasy in the ensuing weeks after Caldwell appeared on the former Fox News host Tucker Carlson's podcast, denouncing their firings as the product of internal office politics at the Pentagon and alleging that the investigation had become, you're never going to believe it, weaponized. Wow. I can't believe it. Weaponized against them. I can't believe that everywhere they turn, everything's being weaponized against them. And the Republicans are going to eliminate all the weaponizing, of course, except when they need it. So they also then learned of a rumor at the Pentagon that the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, OSI, which had been working the case for weeks beforehand, had possibly identified the leaked Panama Canal document by virtue of the fact that it was a draft that lacked certain details that were in the final version of the document. As the rumor went, the document had led the Air Force OSI to focus its investigation on mid-level aides who worked in the U.S. Southern or Central Command or for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and had not been told to focus on the activities of these 3 aides until the weekend after they had been fired. They spent all that time chasing their tails elsewhere, huh? It was not immediately clear whether the rumor was correct or even from where it emerged, but it appears to have spurred the White House to press Parlatore to disclose the evidence against Caldwell, including how the Pentagon knew what was on his phone. At first, Parlatore rebuffed the attempts to obtain the underlying evidence, noting it was inappropriate for the executive branch to insert itself into an ongoing criminal investigation that he said could still yield charges. What a joke that is in this day and age. But towards the end of April, according to what the Trump advisors shared inside the White House, Parlatore suggested that there had been a warrantless wiretap on Caldwell's phone. Parlatore has denied making such a claim when confronted by associates and has generally maintained during the investigation that he has only passed along information briefed to him by others. In other words, he's a leaker. Reached by phone on Monday, Parlatore referred questions to the Pentagon press office. Still, the Trump advisors who reeled from the claim also eventually told Hegseth they were concerned by the optics of Parlatore, who had been close to the former chief of staff Casper, running an investigation that targeted Casper's perceived enemies in the office. Yes, that would be bad. The warrantless wiretap episode was not formally resolved. Why didn't they get to the bottom of that? The investigation was transferred to the office of the Deputy Defense Secretary, Stephen Feinberg, around the time that Parlatore had planned to step away to prepare for the trial of another client, Admiral Robert Burke, on federal bribery charges. Parlatore is everywhere. Parlatore remains a close confidant of Hegseth, and he retained his ability to make recommendations in the investigation, according to two people familiar with the situation. Commissioned by Hegseth as a commander in the Navy Reserve, he is subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice and cannot be directly fired, unless, of course, to hell with everything, in which case, golly, I don't know what to tell you might happen next. All right, is there anything else buried in pocket about Hegseth that we need to catch up on, or can we jump forward at this point to the other couple of things that I wanted to share with you? I guess chronologically, we may be bound to try to catch up on a few other things first. There's just so much out there about Hegseth. Let me share this one with you. This will jump back to April 30th from the Washington Post. Hey, Dan Lamothe. He must be the Lamothe? Yeah. Must be the Pentagon reporter for the Washington Post. Now he's everywhere because we're covering the Pentagon. This is his April 30th entry on what Jennifer, not the other Jennifer that got fired, Jennifer Hegseth, is up to over in the Pentagon, which answer, of course, should be nothing. She's married to the defense secretary, but other than showing up once in a while for wine and cheese parties afterwards, probably nothing should be going on here. But something is. Jennifer Hegseth holds unorthodox role shaping Pentagon affairs. Remember? So now remember that Republicans hate this bitterly. Hillary Clinton took on a role in her husband's administration, and by golly, that was the end of it all. Anyway, her activities have included coordinating her husband's media appearances. That's supposed to be Sean Parnell's job. And meeting with job candidates. That's surely someone else's job. Say people familiar with the arrangement. What do you know? Hours after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth arrived at the Pentagon on his first full day in office, his wife Jennifer made a request. Would the Defense Secretary's staff, she asked, edit and post a video to the Defense Department's social media accounts of his initial remarks to reporters? Well, probably they were going to do that anyway, but the ask felt to some like a directive, which, again, they should be doing this stuff. So it's not really super offensive in that sense. Anyway, that was according to people familiar with the matter and messages reviewed by the Washington Post, though defense officials were aware of Jennifer Hegseth's quiet yet omnipresent role in her husband's bruising Senate confirmation process and her background, like his at Fox News. She had no experience working in government, neither did he, and importantly, these people said, had not been appointed to any official role in the Trump administration. We would always hear that she was saying what kind of videos he should be doing and what kind of statements he should be doing and how the press should be handled. One person recalled, speaking, of course, on condition of anonymity, to discuss a dynamic viewed inside the Pentagon as unorthodox and sometimes problematic. The role of Jennifer Hegseth, 40, throughout her husband's budding tenure in President Donald Trump's cabinet has snapped into focus in recent weeks, after damaging news reports about Pete Hegseth's stumbles as his on-the-job training plays out in public view, including the revelation that she was among a group of people with whom he shared advance notice of a U.S. military operation in Yemen. Others in the unclassified group chat created by the defense secretary using the commercially available Signal app included his brother and a personal lawyer. It's one of at least two such group chats established by her husband that Jennifer Hegseth has been included in, along with other political appointees at the Pentagon. Not that she is one. Said two people familiar with the matter. The other group chat includes Sean Parnell, senior advisor and spokesman, and Tammy Radabaugh, a former Fox News producer, amazingly enough, overseeing how Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon engage with the media, which I thought is what Jennifer was overseeing. these people said. It was not immediately clear whether that group chat, which has not previously been reported, also has included highly sensitive information. Jennifer Hegseth on multiple occasions has informed her husband's staff of media interviews he planned to do, underscoring a belief among some officials that she wields outsized influence over certain Pentagon operations, at least the media ones. Typically, such responsibilities fall to dedicated media engagement professionals employed by the Defense Department, not the secretary's wife. Oh, and also she's on signal chats getting classified information. But hey, she met with potential political appointees as the Trump administration scrutinized people for positions at the Pentagon. Two people familiar with the issue said the role effectively had her conducting job interviews, they said. More recently, people familiar with the matter said Jennifer Hegseth has advocated on behalf of Marine Corps Colonel Ricky Buria, a military aide who abruptly submitted retirement paperwork with plans to become a political appointee and advisor to her husband. Jennifer Hegseth did not respond to requests for comment. The Trump administration has criticized scrutiny of Jennifer Hegseth's unofficial activities, saying it distracts from her husband's historic accomplishments. Historic, oh boy. Kingsley Wilson, remember her? Pentagon spokeswoman, the one who believes in great replacement theory, said in a statement that Secretary Hegseth has delivered more victories to the DOD in 100 days than most secretaries have in 4 years. We are focused on results. I didn't realize we had any contests going on, i.e. wars, but apparently we've had more victories in more wars under Pete Hegseth in 100 days than most secretaries in 4 years who actually, conduct wars. On Tuesday, the Pentagon released an extensive list of milestones for which Hegseth's team takes credit, including a surge of U.S. troops to the southern border and coinciding drop in illegal crossings, a crackdown on diversity efforts within the Defense Department, hooray, the awarding of a contract for the forthcoming F-47 fighter jet, and the administration's intensified military campaign targeting Iran-backed militants in Yemen. Wilson did not respond to a request asking for the Pentagon to weigh in on the specifics of this report. Revelations that Jennifer Hegseth was among those who received advance notice of the Yemen attack plan surfaced this month, which is now last month, following a stunning report in March by The Atlantic magazine that exposed Trump officials' reliance on unclassified group chats to coordinate such highly sensitive matters. Pete Hegseth, The Atlantic reported, divulged when U.S. military strikes would occur, what types of aircraft and weapons would be employed, and critically, the specific times that U.S. service members would be in harm's way. The magazine's editor was accidentally added to the chat by Trump's national security advisor, Michael Waltz. Well, the defense secretary, a former official in the Army National Guard, has insisted that none of the details he shared in either group chat were classified. Numerous former defense officials have assessed that some almost certainly would have been. He has not publicly addressed why he believed his wife would need to know that information. Jennifer Hegseth has appeared with her husband at some meetings with counterparts from nations that are U.S. allies and partners, including talks at the Pentagon with British officials and a gathering in Brussels of nations supporting Ukraine in its defense against Russia's invasion. In response to that development, reported by the Wall Street Journal in March, defense officials have said she did not remain in the room while sensitive discussions occurred, but her presence puzzled attendees nonetheless, people familiar with the matter said. Democrats and at least one Republican lawmaker have called for Pete Hegseth's resignation, raising questions in Washington and beyond about how long Trump can stand by him after spending significant political capital to secure his confirmation only a few months ago. Trump, appearing to acknowledge the defense secretary's struggles, offered him qualified support in an interview published by The Atlantic on Monday, saying, "I think he's going to get it together," but not committing to his future in the cabinet. And I wonder, was that the interview that The Atlantic got by just dialing his phone blindly? I don't know. It all connects somewhere. Trump has not publicly commented on Jennifer Hegseth's activities, or the extent to which her husband has involved her in his official duties. Her involvement at the Pentagon is particularly sensitive given the scrutiny that her husband faced during his confirmation process. Arm in arm, They attended meetings with senators, some of whom were disturbed by the disclosure that Pete Hegseth had paid a $50,000 settlement to a woman who accused him of sexual assault in 2017. Maybe that's why she's sticking close by him. The alleged assault occurred weeks after his second wife had filed for divorce and after he had impregnated Jennifer Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, who has described struggling with alcohol in the past, said he drank too much that evening and the encounter was consensual, or so he thinks from what he can remember. He and Jennifer married in 2019 in a ceremony held at one of Trump's palatial golf clubs in New Jersey. Isn't that nice? Two people familiar with their history as a couple said they were struck by the appearance of numerous jumbo photographs of his wife and family in his office. Though it's common, one person said, for a defense secretary to display some photos of loved ones, Hegseth's exhibit is atypical. The second person said that the display of photos seemed especially striking, considering Hegseth's often stated focus on warfighting and lethality. Publicly, Pete Hegseth has been unequivocal about how important his wife is to him. In an interview with the conservative podcaster Megyn Kelly last year, that's all she is now, conservative podcaster, he and his two J's, he's into the two J's. Jennifer is one of them, but Jennifer's second. Now, if Jennifer's second, who's the J that's first? There's only one it could be. Jesus and Jennifer. Yeah, I'm into the two J's. Sure. Wow. His focus on the two J's here has changed his life, and that today he's a much different person than he was during his hard drinking days years ago. Without those two J's, the third J used to be Jägermeister, but he got rid of it. Hegseth said then, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would be throwing up in this seat, clinging to it as though it were a toilet, I guess, is probably what he was saying. Okay, so that's an interesting story about Mrs. Hegseth. Now, I got a couple other things open here, which are relevant to the Hegseth saga, and I'm trying to decide whether this one is going to add anything or not. From The Intercept, and of course it gives me the opportunity to get the censoring horn out, because of The Intercept. Pentagon insiders on Hegseth leak hypocrisy. Quote, full-on show. How do you like that? I censored myself as I did this. Okay, full on, huh? Current and former defense officials describe Pentagon unrest over accusations of leaks while their boss shares classified information. Nick Terse reported this one on April 25th for The Intercept, and I'm tempted to run right through it. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has declared war on whistleblowers inside the Pentagon at the same time that new reports of his own lax operational security and repeated disclosures of highly classified information to people without security clearances keep emerging. Current and former defense officials and the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee called out Hegseth in conversations with The Intercept for hypocrisy and a lack of accountability. A defense official who spoke on condition of anonymity, you know why, confirmed recent reporting by the Associated Press that Hegseth had a dirty internet connection. That's quote unquote dirty, meaning, subject to hacking, tapping, etc. A dirty internet connection in his office in order to use the Signal messaging app on a personal computer and bypass the Defense Department's security protocols. Sure, that's always innocent. Chief Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell issued a non-denial denial to The Intercept referencing only Hegseth's Defense Department computer. The Secretary of Defense's use of communication systems and channels is classified, said Parnell. However, we can confirm that the Secretary has never used and does not currently use Signal on his government computer. Right, I know. We're actually interested in whether or not he uses Signal on his non-government computer without security on it. More dangerous. That's the non-denial denial. The defense official said that Hegseth used multiple computers and phones, even though personal electronic devices are generally banned due to security vulnerabilities from use inside the defense secretary's office. Like if you try to carry your phone in there, no. But can he do it? Yes, that makes some sense, except you're supposed to be able to trust that they won't use it for unsecured communications. But you can't trust that because he always does it. Anyway, another official said that the double standard at the Pentagon, where rank-and-file employees are suspected of leaks without cause while the chief shares classified attack plans with unauthorized civilians, has bred anger and discontent among staff. I don't mind telling you this now, one official said. I can't say I really care too much anymore. Hegseth used Signal to share details about forthcoming strikes in Yemen on March 15th in a group chat named Defense Team Huddle that included more than a dozen personal and professional contacts, including his wife, Jennifer, a former Fox News producer who does not work at the Pentagon, but who also does. Also in the group were Hegseth's brother, Phil, who does work at the Pentagon, thanks to Pete's good graces, and Tim Parlatore, who serves as his personal lawyer. Both have jobs with the Department of Defense. The Signal group also included many of Hegseth's then top aides, including Joe Casper, his chief of staff, Dan Caldwell, and Darren Selnick. The chat reportedly revealed information, of course you know about this, also disclosed in a separate Signal chat that same day, which mistakenly included Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic. Unlike the latter chat, the Team Huddle group was created by Hegseth, who shared classified information with people who had no reason to know sensitive attack plans. Accountability starts at the top. Secretary Hegseth has refused to take responsibility for his own mishandling of classified information, but has readily punished others for far less. Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, an Army veteran, and ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, told The Intercept, hypocrisy and finger-pointing is no way to lead the U.S. military. 5 current and former defense officials who spoke with The Intercept castigated Hegseth for the unauthorized disclosures. 4 also drew specific attention to the defense secretary's repeated efforts to root out other Pentagon officials who supposedly leak information. I'll give you 4 heads instead of mine. Casper, Hegseth's former chief of staff, called out unauthorized disclosures of national security information involving sensitive communications with principals within the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and threatened that parties found responsible would be referred to the appropriate criminal law enforcement entity for criminal prosecution in a March memo. But let me remind you that in one of the articles we read earlier, we learned that there have been no referrals whatsoever to the FBI to investigate any of this. They and we understood why, because it would probably implicate Hegseth or people still close to him. But in addition, that was an explicit promise from Joe Casper at some point in March. And guess what? Not actually doing it. This is exactly what Hegseth did multiple times, said one of the officials who spoke on condition of anonymity. Casper also threatened to use polygraph tests as a part of the investigation of leaks. Less than a month later, news broke that Casper was leaving his post amid infighting and recriminations about unauthorized disclosures among Hegseth's aides. Hegseth is even more unfit for the role of SecDef, Secretary of Defense, than we anticipated. In just a few weeks, he has personally committed serious security breaches, denied this, and then refused accountability. And he has set the Pentagon, and by extension the entire DoD, into chaos, said Wes Bryant, who until recently served as the Chief of Civilian Harm Assessments and Senior Analyst and Advisor on Precision Warfare, Targeting, and Civilian Harm Mitigation at the Pentagon's Civilian Protection Center of Excellence. Boy, they're not that excellent at that, though. It was very clear to me that he would do exactly as he is doing, refusing to hold himself accountable to the very standards, conduct, and regulations that he is charged with holding the force to. But that is the Trump administration and current GOP norm now. They are above the law and anything goes. Hegseth blamed disgruntled former employees for revealing the second Signal chat group, the second one. Reports suggest that is a reference to 4 senior advisors who recently left the Defense Department. 3 of them, Colin Carroll, Caldwell, and Selnick, were escorted out of the Pentagon and reportedly accused of leaking information to the press. They put out a joint statement on X questioning if there was even a real investigation of leaks to begin with. Certainly nothing was referred to the FBI, anyhow. A 4th advisor, former Defense Department spokesman John Ulyot, I don't think we got that name yet, Ullyot. Well, he resigned earlier this month and then published an opinion piece detailing the depths of dysfunction at the Pentagon, including the peddling of lies by, quote, Hegseth's team. Defense Department officials working for Hegseth tried to smear the aides anonymously to reporters, claiming they were fired for leaking sensitive information as part of an investigation ordered earlier this month, Ulyat wrote. Yet none of this is true. I don't know. Maybe all of it's true. Maybe he's lying. I don't know. But he says none of it's true. While the department said that it would conduct polygraph tests as part of the probe, not one of the three has been given a lie detector test. No, that's no help anyway. But that's a signature move by the FBI. And if there are no criminal referrals to the FBI, probably not going to be very many polygraph tests either. Who would you give the results to? In fact, at least one of them has told former colleagues that investigators advised him he was about to be cleared officially of any wrongdoing. A former defense official who was not authorized to talk to the press by his current employer referred to the episode as, of course, we heard earlier, the full-on show. Hegseth's recent purge following the February firings of top military officers, including former Joint Chiefs Chair Charles Q. Brown and Chief of Naval Operations, one of the other women fired, Admiral Lisa Franchetti. The Defense Department refused to provide information about the number of unauthorized disclosures of national security information since January 20th, and how many instances have been referred to law enforcement for criminal prosecution as threatened by Casper's March memo. We know, at least as of the writing of some of these other articles, there were none for Signalgate. Anyway, it remains unclear whether Hegseth will be held to account for his actions. Hegseth is currently under investigation for his use of Signal in sharing classified information with Goldberg and others. That inquiry is being conducted, though, by the acting Inspector General Stephen Stebbins, because President Donald Trump fired Robert Storch from his Senate-confirmed Pentagon Inspector General role as part of his firings of 17 inspectors general across the government in January. Jack Reed, the Rhode Island senator, has called for the Inspector General to expand its investigation to include the Defense Team Huddle chat, the second one. He must immediately explain why he reportedly texted classified information that could endanger American service members' lives on a commercial app that included his wife, brother, and personal lawyer, said Reed. Hegseth's personal phone number, which he uses for his Signal chats, was recently available on WhatsApp and Facebook, as well as Sleeper.com, a fantasy football and sports betting site. It's great to have a gambling Secretary of Defense who's a drunk, where he used the username, this is a good one, very clever, Pete Hegseth. That is secure. Experts said that this puts his Signal account at high risk for targeting by hackers and foreign adversaries. In response to a specific question by The Intercept about whether Hegseth's disclosures of national security information have been referred to law enforcement for, quote, criminal prosecution, a Pentagon spokesperson demurred. We won't be able to provide anything on this topic at the moment, the unnamed spokesperson replied by email. They wouldn't even reveal the name of the spokesperson, much less the answer to the question. Anyway, I found that interesting, to say the least. By the way, before I go on, can I get a wiki entry on Tim Parlatore, just to catch up on that guy? But I want the wiki entry, not... has he got one? I'm not finding a mention of him. Well, he hasn't got his own profile on Wikipedia, but here's a mention of him, and I think this is how he kind of came to our attention the first time around. On May 17th, so this would probably have been May 17th of last year, Parlatore announced that he was quitting Trump's legal team. This is in the entry on the Jack Smith special counsel investigation. So he was part of the defense team in the January 6th, I guess, investigations. He contended that Boris Epstein hindered his access to Trump, such that Parlatore, let me see if I can find the whole thing. I'm just reading from the Google results, but we ran out of space there. All right. Well, at any rate, yeah, I think he first came to our attention that way. Now there's a whole timeline. Here we are. May 17th. This is 2023, actually. Where were we here? There we are. May 17th, Timothy Parlatore announced he was quitting Trump's legal team. He contended Boris Epstein hindered his access to Trump such that Parlatore could not provide adequate defense. Several other Trump attorneys had attempted to intervene with Trump to advise him. Epstein was giving him rosy legal assessments in the face of dire circumstances. Parlatore also claimed Epstein tried to prevent the legal team from conducting searches for documents at Trump's other properties after the Mar-a-Lago search by the FBI. A Trump spokesperson said Parlatore's statements regarding current members of the legal team are unfounded and categorically false. Epstein remained a top Trump advisor and coordinator of his myriad legal matters since Epstein's alleged involvement. It goes on at that point to be about Epstein, who's dirty enough. It's just interesting that, Trump is Trump. Did it ever occur to him? Did it ever ring a bell, this name? Did he just say, well, that's Pete's business. He's his personal lawyer. It never occurs to him that he's allowing Pete Hegseth to install at the Pentagon Tim Parlatore, who was a personal lawyer for him, who resigned from his most important criminal case and accused Boris Epstein of screwing the whole thing up. And he's remained loyal to Epstein. Why has he not refused Hegseth access to Parlatore? I'm not sure. I don't know. This is a very complex and weird web of people who are terrible for 12 different reasons. All right, let's see. Let me add to our widening web here about Hegseth. We're just going to do the whole thing about Hegseth today. A couple other stories here. Let me, I guess I kind of have to do it in the order that they're open because it's just difficult to tell which one's which without reading the whole thing. Here's something from the Air Force Times.com. Watchdog probes if aides were asked to delete Hegseth's signal chats. That's a June 6th entry by Tara Kopp reporting for the AP, and that answers the question of what's the difference between this window and that window. I could just go straight to the source and read the AP's version of it, but what the hell. We'll give it a look here and see how the Air Force Times treats it, because that's kind of interesting. I don't know whether they make any editorial decisions about what Tara Kopp wrote. But the Pentagon's watchdog is looking into whether any of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's aides were asked to delete signal messages that may have shared sensitive military information with a reporter, according to two people familiar with the investigation and documents reviewed by the Associated Press. The Inspector General's request focuses on how information about the March 15th airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen was shared on the messaging app. This comes as Hegseth is scheduled to testify before Congress next week for the first time since his confirmation hearing. And if my timing is right, that'll be, of course, now this week. But what day, I'm not sure. Anyway, he is likely to face questions under oath, not only about his handling of sensitive information, but also the wider turmoil at the Pentagon following the departures of several senior aides, and an internal investigation over leak information, or information leaks, or leak information as well. Sure, why not? They said I could do it either way. Hegseth already has faced questions over the installation of an unsecured internet line, that's the dirty line, that bypassed the Pentagon security protocols, and revelations that he shared details about the military strikes with multiple signal chats. One of the chats included his wife and brother, while the other included President Donald Trump's top national security officials and inadvertently included the Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg. So they were both screwed up. They both had holes in them. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson, the one who loves great replacement theory, had no comment on Friday, citing the pending investigation. The Inspector General's office didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Besides finding out whether anyone was asked to delete signal messages, the Inspector General is also asking some past and current staffers who were with Hegseth on the day of the strikes who posted the information and who had access to his phone, according to the two of the people familiar with the investigation and the documents reviewed by the AP. The people were not authorized to discuss the investigation and therefore spoke on condition of anonymity. I guess just trying to establish, well, we know it came from his phone. Did he do it? Is there any reason to believe someone else would have grabbed his phone? Let's find out. Democratic lawmakers and a small number of Republicans have said that the information Hegseth posted to the Signal chats before the military jets had reached their targets could have put those pilots' lives at risk, and that for any lower-ranking members of the military, it would have led to their firing. Hegseth has said none of the information was classified. Multiple current and former military officials have said there is no way details with that specificity, especially before a strike took place, would have been okay to share on an unsecured device. Now, it may be the non-denial denial in action here. Well, President Trump said if it comes down to it, he'll declare that stuff declassified and to have been declassified at the time, so you can't charge me and I can never, there's no reason for me to admit to disseminating classified information. If I ever get in trouble for it, we'll declassify it retroactively and I'll still be not guilty of disseminating classified information. But that's why the defense officials who are asked about it, say, you know what? It's not even the classification that matters. If you pretend it's declassified, it still could have been used to kill those pilots. That's why it would be classified. You could deny that you were going to classify it and just say, we felt like giving that information out, but you're still stuck with the fact that you handed around information that could have gotten pilots killed. The end. I said repeatedly, nobody is texting war plans, Hegseth told Fox News Channel in April after reporting emerged about the chat that included his family members. I look at war plans every day. What was shared over Signal then and now, however you characterize it, was informal, unclassified coordinations for media coordinations and other things. That's what I've said from the beginning, except that's not really what it was. Trump has made clear that Hegseth continues to have his support, saying during a Memorial Day speech at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia that the defense secretary went through a lot, but he's doing really well. Hegseth has limited his public engagements, to say the least, with the press since the Signal controversy. He has yet to hold a Pentagon press briefing, and his spokesman has briefed reporters there only once. Where's the counter on the news channels? Days since there was a briefing. The Inspector General is investigating Hegseth at the request of the Republican chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, and the committee's top Democrat, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. Signal, in case you didn't know, is a publicly available app that provides encrypted communications, but it can be hacked and is not approved. Not approved. Not approved. They keep saying it is, but it's not approved for carrying classified information. On March 14th, one day before the strikes against the Houthis, the Defense Department cautioned personnel about the vulnerability of that very app. Trump has said his administration targeted the Houthis over their unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism. He has noted the disruption Houthi attacks caused through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, key waterways for energy and cargo shipments between Asia and Europe through Egypt's Suez Canal. The Houthi rebels have attacked more than 100 merchant vessels with missiles and drones, sinking 2 vessels, killing 4 sailors between November of 2023 until January of this year. Their leadership described the attacks as aimed at ending the Israeli war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, just so you know. Okay, that brings us up to speed on that angle, and I guess it means we can get rid of the AP version itself of the same article and move on instead to this tidbit about Pete Hegseth from where? Tag24.com. I don't even know what I'm looking at, but they just have a short blurb here by Evan Williams, also dated June 6th. Trump furious with Hegseth. Things are progressing here. Furious with Hegseth. Why? Over Musk's invitation to classified meeting. Does this happen only because of the context of the fight between Donald Trump and Elon Musk? Or is this finally a bridge too far? I love Pete Hegseth. He can do no wrong. Wait a minute. I hate Elon Musk. You helped Elon Musk. Now I'm mad at you. President Donald Trump was reportedly furious with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for inviting tech billionaire Elon Musk into a classified military briefing, sources suggest. A new report from The Atlantic, and now I've got it, maybe we can share that next, revealed that Hegseth's tenure in the DoD began to unravel. It's unraveling at last when he got too close to then Department of Government Efficiency head, which he isn't, Elon Musk. In mid-March, shortly before he became embroiled in controversies about his and other top national security leaders using the Signal messaging service, Hegseth reportedly invited Musk into a top-secret military briefing. Well, this is all true, and I'm starting to think maybe instead of reading their version of it, we ought to go over to the gift article I found on social media that leads to the full text of the Atlantic piece, which, by the way, also carries the byline again of Ashley Parker, who's reporting on Trump's phone habits. I was so interested in reading about the other day, but this time she's accompanied here. In fact, the lead on the byline is Missy Ryan, and then there's Ashley Parker. Here's the deal. When Pete Hegseth's Pentagon tenure started going sideways, wow. The defense secretary annoyed Donald Trump with a favor for Elon Musk. Hegseth's problems only grew from there, which is amazing because throughout all of the other episodes we were reading, we kept hearing, no, Donald Trump is still on his side, still got his backing. He'll fire or allow everyone else to be fired, but not Pete Hegseth. But that meeting for Elon Musk was kind of early on. So now we know that he was on Trump's watch list or radar throughout all of those denials. How has he continued to survive? And are we going to receive all this information and therefore be in the know when the axe finally comes down for Pete Hegseth? Or is it just going to go on forever? Things were going fine, they say, for Pete Hegseth, right up until a chance encounter with the world's richest man. When he was hanging around the White House every day, making a nuisance of himself. If you visited the White House, you were eventually going to run into him. Anyway, his pursuit of Donald Trump's agenda at the Pentagon had made him a star among the president's advisors. The former Fox News host had moved swiftly to roll back diversity initiatives in the military and to expand U.S. troops' role in halting immigration at the southern border. His willingness to challenge Republican orthodoxy on foreign policy and punch back at critics was seen as an asset as Trump began his second term. But then, in mid-March, before all that reporting from April and May, Hegseth bumped into Elon Musk in a White House hallway and extended an ill-fated invitation to the tech titan for an exclusive military briefing. We remember that episode. Up until then, DoD had been the golden child, one person familiar with Hegseth's office told us. When Trump learned about the proposed briefing the night before it was scheduled to take place, he was displeased. Although Hegseth denied a New York Times report that the March 21st meeting would focus on plans for potential war with Beijing, I remind you, he's also at the same time texting around plans for potential war with Panama, Trump told others that any presentation on China would be inappropriate for Musk. He's right about that. Who has extensive business interests there, according to people familiar with the president's reaction. So it's not always that Trump doesn't understand when things like that are inappropriate. It's just that he doesn't do anything about it or care about it being inappropriate when he's involved. But other people, yes. The very idea that top officers would brief the businessman in the tank, that is, the secure Pentagon conference room where the military brass assembles for visits by the commander-in-chief, added to an unwelcome perception that Musk wielded outsized government power. We were always wondering about why Trump tolerated that at the time. In a call hours after the Times story appeared, Trump made clear to Hegseth that the briefing was, quote, a bad look for the administration. According to individuals with knowledge of the call, when Hegseth visited the White House the next day to debut the Air Force's newest fighter jet, is that the F-47, Trump again conveyed his displeasure. "This is crazy and stupid," Trump said of the briefing. One of the people told us, "Why would we even do this?" Those are actually pointed questions and good ones. Trump reserved most of his ire, though, for Musk, a foreshadowing of the breakdown in their relationship that played out across social media today, the day of the publication of this piece in The Atlantic. Anyway, the president did not express anger toward Hegseth personally, White House officials told us, yet the Musk briefing episode and Trump's response to Hegseth, details of which have not been previously reported, represented a turning point for the new Pentagon chief, according to people familiar with his tenure who spoke with us on the condition of anonymity. Since then, a series of embarrassing revelations, including Hegseth's disclosure of military attack plans on messaging app Signal, twice, I would add, have fueled turmoil and suspicion at the Pentagon's highest levels. They have also intensified public scrutiny of Hegseth's judgment and deepened questions about his ability to deliver on the president's military priorities, including pushing back against China and demonstrating American strength, which the president believes was eroded by his predecessor. Things were headed in the right direction, the person familiar with Hegseth's office added, but then the leaks and Signalgate just really effed up Pete. And of course, it's not effed, it's fucked up Pete. But by the way, that should have been in the opposite order. So, little slip of the tongue. The leaks and Signalgate just really fucked Pete up. But okay. Nevertheless, they persisted. Hegseth oversees a workforce of more than 3 million and a budget of close to $1 trillion without a chief of staff, as you know. His shrunken circle of close aides lacks extensive Pentagon experience. Key military commanders are preparing to retire without replacements in sight. Sidelined aides have aired details of unseemly feuds at the department's senior levels, and a series of unflattering media reports have fueled what numerous officials describe as Hegseth's fixation on stopping leaks, which is amazing because, of course, he's at the center of several leaks. White House officials say that Trump continues to support Hegseth. The defense chief's job is 100% safe. That's a quote, one told us. This official also noted that in addition to having Trump's affection, Hegseth is personally liked by both Vice President J.D. Vance and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly told us that the entire administration remains fully behind Secretary Hegseth's mission to prioritize our warfighters, eliminate terrorists, and restore common sense at the DoD. But scores of congressional Democrats have called on Hegseth to resign. One Republican, Representative Dan Bacon of Nebraska, has suggested that he be fired. Musk's Pentagon visit originated from a conversation in Musk's sparsely furnished office that followed their impromptu meeting in a White House hallway when Hegseth suggested that Musk come over to the Pentagon to talk with senior military leaders. The defense chief later authorized the meeting to be held in the tank. I guess Musk might have found out about that and thought it sounded cool, so can I have it there? Several people told us that Hegseth's invitation came at a moment when the Defense Department, like other agencies across the government, was facing the prospect of cuts by Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Whether Hegseth has touted Doge's steps to reduce the number of federal contractors, or while Hegseth has done that, and other personnel, DoD was not driving the process. The invitation represented a chance for Pentagon leaders to help steer Doge's direction in cutting one of the world's largest bureaucracies. A representative from Musk did not respond to multiple requests for comment. Just 3 days after Musk's Pentagon visit, Hegseth's judgment again came into question when Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, revealed that he had been added to a high-level signal chat about plans to bomb Houthi militants in Yemen. Although then National Security Advisor Michael Waltz had inadvertently invited Goldberg to the thread, it was Hegseth who escalated the exchange by posting details of an imminent attack on Houthi targets, including the precise times when U.S. jets would be flying over their targets in Yemen. Current and former officials have said that such advanced attack information would typically be highly classified because of the danger its disclosure could cause to pilots. A cascade of other revelations followed, including stories detailing the unusual role that Hegseth's wife, Jennifer, has played in his work at the Pentagon, where she has attended meetings with foreign officials and issued orders related to her husband's media appearances. News reports have also revealed that Hegseth gave his younger brother a senior Pentagon role and authorized the installation of a makeup studio, because of how manly it is, of course, at a cost of thousands of dollars. Current and former officials told us that Hegseth has since threatened to polygraph numerous senior officials, including the acting chairman, not the chairman, but the acting. Nope, not the effing chairman, the acting chairman. Yeah, I'm going to polygraph the acting Joint Chiefs of Staff chair. All right. Well, he has also overturned decades of tradition in the military's relationship with the press, ousting media outlets from their longstanding Pentagon workspaces in favor of Trump-friendly voices and ending reporters' access to most of the building. When The Atlantic interviewed Trump in the Oval Office in late April, the president said he'd had a talk with Hegseth about the various embarrassing reports, predicting, "I think he's going to get it together." Like with the drinking, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so apparently that's the sit-down, not the anonymous phone call interview that they had with the president. Anyway, good. I'm glad we got that answer. Yet, the Musk and Signal episodes reveal what some individuals familiar with Hegseth's tenure described to us as his tendency to use his position heading the world's most advanced military as a flex. He attempts to impress others with his access to sensitive information and his power to direct American forces, even if it means a little indiscretion along the way. He's got this $180,000 Ferrari. That's the Pentagon for him. Another person familiar with Hegseth's office told us, and he likes to show it off. Hegseth created further controversy after he elevated Ricky Buria, the Marine who'd been serving as a military aide when Hegseth took office, to a senior role and sought to name him as chief of staff. Buria often made demands of more senior officers, and his sudden promotion to a senior political position rubbed many in the, here it is, rank-conscious military the wrong way. Trump personally blocked Buria from the chief of staff job because of his ties to Lloyd Austin, Joe Biden's Pentagon chief. White House official told us. People familiar with the Pentagon staffing told us that the White House had explored hiring at least 4 replacements for Joe Casper, who had abruptly left the chief of staff job in April to take a new role at the department, but that none had worked out. What role did he take, I wonder? That is odd. Chief of staff to the Secretary of Defense. What else do you want instead? I should look that up and see what he's doing. Is there, do you think, an entry on that? Joe Casper, is it ER? Yeah. Wikipedia? See what's, oh no, that's the football coach. Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. Is that current? No, that's a list of political appointments. I mean, is that what happened? He moved from, yeah, that doesn't sound like a voluntary move, does it? From chief of staff to media guy? I don't know. And considering that was Sean Parnell's job, and then he got handed another job, and did they move him out? I thought that was going to the Great Replacement girl. I don't know. That's weird. Anyway, where were we with this? The chief Pentagon spokesman, Sean Parnell, who also does everything else there, said in a statement, the personnel changes, remember this one, are natural and necessary feature of any highly effective organization, and people don't care about palace intrigue. Okay. In response to suggestions from the White House, the Pentagon has in recent weeks begun to slowly expand its media engagement beyond MAGA-friendly outlets, taking reporters from several mainstream print news organizations on Hegseth's travels to Latin America and Asia. Kingsley Wilson, that's the Great Replacement girl, Hegseth's Pentagon press secretary now, told us that Hegseth's travels have involved bringing along journalists from a wide range of outlets. Hegseth, however, has stuck to a rote playbook in responding to unfavorable news, attempt to discredit the media, then pivot to his efforts to rebuild the military and restore the warrior ethos that he says was lost under Democratic leaders. This is what the media does, even though he comes from the media. He told reporters during a family Easter event at the White House. He's going to stick it to somebody on Easter. He says, while children in party attire were looking on from behind, he gestured at the journalists assembled before him and called them hoaxsters. They try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. It's not going to work with me. I'm the only one who can slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Trump has stood by his Pentagon chief, suggesting that he admires the combative approach Hegseth takes in attacking administration detractors. He is remember, of course, tough cookie who went through a lot, the president said late last month, not mentioning that it was his Memorial Day speech. Trump, and likewise, people mostly not mentioning when they just mention, what's her name, Kingsley, whatever her name is, at random. They don't remind people, Kingsley Wilson, that she's a great replacement lady. Okay, or girl, depending on how old she is. I don't know. Anyway, Trump also spent significant political capital, of course, pushing through Hegseth's nomination. Vance had to cast the tie-breaking vote after the Senate deadlocked on confirmation at 50-50, and he's reluctant to abandon him now, especially because it might look like he's giving the media a scalp. That support will be tested next week, now this week, presumably, when Hegseth begins a series of hearings on Capitol Hill convened to address the administration's budget requests. It's a normal and routine thing. But Hegseth is sure to face difficult questions from Democrats, including on his handling of sensitive information, the upheaval in the Pentagon's upper ranks, and his firing of senior military officials. Those officers include the second ever black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the first female Navy chief, both of whom Hegseth previously suggested were promoted because of their race and gender, respectively. Top Republicans, meanwhile, are unhappy with the administration spending proposal that they say doesn't include enough money for defense, versus the others who say it spends too much. I don't know, but never for defense, of course. Many at the Pentagon question how long the president's backing for their boss will last. During his first term, Trump cycled through 4 defense secretaries and 4 national security advisors. He also voiced support for Waltz until the former national security advisor was pushed aside last month and asked to take a less powerful role at the United Nations. Although the president appears to appreciate Hegseth's pugnacious public style, he may require more from his defense secretary over time as the administration faces pressure to deliver on a set of complex and interlocking goals, including fixing a Byzantine military procurement system, reviving a diminished defense industry, and strengthening America's response to China's military rise. Fighters endear themselves to Trump, one person told us, but you can't have a one-dimensional game. At a certain point, it's going to get old. So the question is, are we at that point yet? And now I think maybe we know all we need to know to understand when Pete Hegseth is inexplicably and explicitly thrown over the side. For who? I don't know. I can't guess. You can never predict these things. But if it happens, we're going to be ready. And boy, are we going to be ready. In keeping with the quasi-military theme here, having talked about Pete Hegseth for an hour and a half, how about one more addition to the growing GOP Rogues Gallery that also has a military bent to it? Our growing Rogues Gallery, of course, is a collection of people you should be keeping an eye on because they're terrible, although they may not make it all the way through to daily news because there are so many terrible people and achieving their terribleness at such a high level. Like you've never... Yeah, okay, you know how it goes. Anyway, let me grab this one here from The Independent. I don't know why we're depending on an independent, for one thing. They clearly don't want that to happen. But more to the point, they are independent of you. If you depend on them, that may make them uncomfortable, but what can I tell you? That's the business they're in. The Independent, I was going to say, why are we depending on a UK paper to tell us this about a member of the United States Congress? And I assume somebody in this country has told us this already, and we just didn't notice it, or I don't know. But at any rate, what I have for you, a GOP rep you know what that means, a GOP representative, was awarded a Bronze Star for his bravery in Iraq. Sounds like a good thing, except for having to be in Iraq. Those he reportedly saved to win that Bronze Star, I guess, can't remember him being there. That's one of those chin scratchers for you. Representative Corey Mills reportedly saved at least 3 fellow soldiers while serving in Iraq, and yet no one seems to be able to remember this. Katie Hawkinson reporting this for The Independent. I don't really remember ever hearing this one. Representative Corey Mills, a MAGA Republican from Florida, was awarded a Bronze Star for his heroism in Iraq in 2003, but those he allegedly saved don't remember him being there, a new report reveals. It's usually a prerequisite for getting that Bronze Star, but Mills was honored after he administered, quote, life-saving care to fellow soldiers Joe Haidt, or Height, possibly Heite, and Alan Babin, Babin, at great risk to his own life while under intense enemy fire in Iraq. Notice reports. What's Notice? I don't remember. But Notice.org is, it's a news site of some kind. What am I looking at? Notice. I've seen that before. I don't know. I'm not keeping up with who's publishing what where, but Notice is I guess, was the first to notice this thing. I don't know. By the way, so I'm reading a piece here from, there must be a date here somewhere, May 5th. I'm going way back, just trying to bring you stories that I forgot to tell you earlier. Now, Notice reported all of this, citing the document recommending Mills receive the award. Mills enlisted in the Army in July of 1999 at 19 years old and was honorably discharged in August of 2003. How do you like that? Not motivated by 9/11 to join, but I guess saving money for college, as many kids do. But Height, which we'll call him rather than calling him Mr. Haight, Height told Notice that Mills, quote, didn't save, unquote, his life. Didn't kill him, but he didn't save his life. And that he didn't even suffer life-threatening injuries. That seems sort of strange. I don't recall him being there either, he added. Henry Barbie, perhaps? I don't know, like the Barbie doll, but without the I in it. B-A-R-B-E. Barb? Henry Barb. Why has everybody got weird names in this story? A medic who flew in via helicopter to help evacuate Babin also told Notice he doesn't remember Mills being there. From what I understand about Mills is he might have been in the unit. I don't remember him being involved in the medevac, Barb said. To be fair, I was worried about other patients. I don't remember him, and from what I understand, other people don't remember him. Chris Painter, the platoon sergeant, said he can pretty much confirm 100% Corey Mills was not up at the bridges at the location of everything. Now, if he came to the company position to assist in escorting Babin to the BN aid station, I don't know, but he wasn't at the bridge where it all happened. I do know that, Painter told Notice, and I guess a little bit of military jargon in there, and not one BN aid is a battalion aid station. All right. Well, at any rate, Army documents recommending Mills for the award also state he saved Joe Ferrand, or Ferrand possibly, a sergeant who had been, quote, grabbed by an enemy insurgent, unquote, in a separate incident, according to Notice. But Ferrand previously claimed Mills's involvement in the incident was a, quote, this is his quote, fabrication, and said that the act, quote, never took place in a written statement to government officials. In response to these claims, Mills told Notice that, quote, no soldier writes their own DA Form 638, referring to the document used to recommend soldiers for awards. It is a recommendation for award, and soldiers cannot recommend themselves, Mills said. That sounds true. The form must be reviewed and signed by commanding officers. Mills also conceded that it was, quote, true that Height, quote, did not have life-threatening injuries, unquote, and attributed the discrepancies to how chaotic the day was. I was on the ground, Mills said. It was a chaotic day, and understandable that others may have different recollections of events. The questions around his Bronze Star have been relayed to the Office of Congressional Ethics, Department of Justice, a U.S. Attorney's Office in Florida, and the FBI, the source told Notice. The FBI, of course. Well, we know what they'll do with it, and presumably the Department of Justice as a whole joins in, and the Office of Congressional Ethics, to the extent that it's dominated by Republicans, will perhaps just drop it too. I don't know. U.S. Attorney's Office in Florida, yeah, probably. This isn't, though, the first time Mills's military accomplishments have been questioned. Wow, that is unusual. Last year, Mills's Republican challenger Michael Johnson handed out flyers accusing him of lying about his military service and committing stolen valor, the Daytona Beach News-Journal reports. Mills denied the claims at the time. I'm tired of the slander and the defamation, Mills told the News-Journal. I ran for office to be able to serve the American people, not to defend something I did 20 years ago over and over and over. Mills was elected to Congress, allegedly, maybe he just made that up, in 2022, and has since proven a staunch supporter of President Donald Trump, if you can imagine that. Mills even attended his hush money trial last summer alongside fellow lawmakers, including Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Representative Byron Donalds. And there's a photo of him, I think, at the thing, dressed in the Trump uniform, the red tie and the blue suit, just like everybody else in the photo. I mean, the only other person in the photo is Byron Donalds, but we all recall that they all went dressed in Donald Trump suits, and it was weird. Anyway, the Republican lawmaker also made headlines in February after his romantic partner, Sarah Raviani, filed a police report claiming she had been assaulted by Mills at his Washington, D.C. apartment. Wait a minute. This one I think I remember. And here's the police report obtained by NBC Washington states her significant other for over a year, that's Mills, grabbed her, shoved her, and pushed her out of the door. Raviani, a co-founder of the group Iranians for Trump, then allowed police to listen in on a phone call between her and the congressman in which he allegedly instructed her to, quote, lie about the origin of her bruises. Mills vehemently denies any wrongdoing whatsoever. The Independent has contacted Mills's office for comment. They've did that in May 5th. I don't know whether they got any comment. I haven't heard anything else about this guy since then. I don't know. He keeps finding himself caught up in situations where everybody disputes his version of events, even when they're extremely important ones. I found that interesting. Here is a story that is a bit of a wild card. I'm not certain where we will shoehorn this one into the rotation. You'll just have to wait and see. Although I guess you're now seeing. Okay, so email me and let me know the answer to what I decided. Something that happened or that was reported way back on May 13th, and it's been waiting for its chance to break through from the Australian broadcasting company, ABC News. Australia's Jorn Defense Radar, JORN, let's go find out what that means. Defense Radar is being bought by Canada. The decision is part of a wider shift. Norman Hermant reports this for ABC News. In the red dirt near, I'm going to guess, Laverton in Western Australia, 2 rows of poles sit side by side, stretching 3 kilometers into the distance. They are antennas, 480 sets of them, and they are just one part of a vast radar system that lets Australia monitor the sky and sea thousands of kilometers from our shores. The system is called JORN, which stands for Jindalee, which I guess is where it is, maybe. Jindalee Operational Radar Network. Jindalee is an Aboriginal word that means the place the eye cannot see. Oh, very interesting. Thought it might be our Aboriginal name for the place where it is, but the place the eye cannot see. That would be, taking a look at the way this thing is constructed, I think an over-the-horizon radar network. That is to say, outside of line of sight. A very interesting concept, over-the-horizon radar in general. Way back in the 80s, 90s, I remember studying the over-the-horizon backscatter radar system that bounces its signals off of some of the upper levels of the atmosphere and then the surface of the Earth, and then bounces back and catches the signals that way. It's a very interesting way of going beyond line of sight. Let's see if that's what this is all about. It's critical for Australia, said the nation's chief defense scientist, Professor Tanya Monro. Odd spelling of Monroe. No E on the end. Monro. M-O-N-R-O. The system is recognized as a world leader in, there it is, over-the-horizon radar, and Canada has taken note, announcing plans last month to spend $6.5 billion to purchase JORN, not porn, JORN, for its Arctic defense. You see, they used to get that from us, and we used to put it there for our own convenience as well. We were worried about missiles coming over the North Pole from you-know-where. Anyway, it's a really significant milestone, Professor Monroe told. It's 7:30, I assume that. Is that the name of the program? Maybe the morning news program on ABC? It's the biggest defense export proposed by quite some margin, and it really holds up the extraordinary things we can do in Australia when we put our minds to it and commit. JORN is the product of 50 years of development by the Commonwealth's Defense Science and Technology Group, the DSTG. Aside from Laverton, it also operates from stations near Alice Springs in the Northern Territory and Longreach in Queensland to give Australia unsurpassed surveillance capabilities up to 3,000 kilometers away. The radar, there it is beeping in the background. I wonder if anybody heard that. That wasn't the radar. The radar's operations center is at RAAF Base Edinburgh, north of Adelaide. And across the road is a vast DSTG site where research leaders Dr. Joe Fabrizio heads a team that constantly tweaks the high-frequency radio waves that give JORN its edge. The interest that there's been in JORN is a testament to the high class and high value over-the-horizon radar systems that defense and the defense industry are capable of producing, he said. Unlike conventional radars, JORN transmits high-frequency radio waves 110 kilometers up into the ionosphere, where they bounce back to the Earth's surface from above. Okay, so familiar stuff. It's just that they're producing their own version of it. And more importantly, becoming a major contractor and selling it to other countries other NATO countries that used to get their technology from the U.S. So almost the exact opposite, one might say, of what Donald Trump hoped to be able to do with our NATO partners and the rest of the world. Nothing excites him more than selling them weapons. Oh, well, it's almost like he set up for failure by attacking all of the market for our weapons. So, where were we here? Right. Unlike conventional radars, JORN transmits high-frequency radio waves 110 kilometers up into the ionosphere, where they bounce back down to the Earth's surface from above. Objects underneath, like planes or ships on the ocean's surface, are detected when waves reflect back to JORN's massive array of receivers thousands of kilometers away. By the way, this too, I remember, very effective as against not only surface ships, but more importantly, really, and probably even more effective against cruise missiles, or what they call the air-breathing threats, as distinct from ICBMs, which exit the atmosphere and fly out in space and then re-enter above their targets. But cruise missiles don't do that, and they can, of course, cruise at lower altitudes, and therefore invisibly to traditional radar, or at least in some places traditionally able to evade radar, but not so with this kind of radar. And also probably more effective even against stealth planes, stealth technology, which lower the profile against traditional radar, but not necessarily as radar coming, reflected back down from the ionosphere. A totally different angle of approach. One of the key features of over-the-horizon radar is its down-looking viewing geometry, Dr. Fabrizio said. In other words, all that low flying you see in movies like Top Gun, Maverick to avoid radar don't work with JORN. An over-the-horizon radar can detect and track aircraft the same size as a BAE Hawk 127, which is around 12 meters long, in case you didn't know. What? Okay. Or larger aircraft, and ships the same size as an Armidale class, okay, patrol boat, which is roughly 56 meters long, Dr. Fabrizio said. Next section, it's not American. Defense journalist Murray Brewster from Canada's CBC said JORN is just the sort of system needed in the Arctic. Canada has been under pressure from the U.S. to ramp up defense spending, especially in the far north, where its Cold War-era radar stations need to be replaced. It's been a few years that Canada has been in the market for this, Brewster told 730. So new that when Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the deal to purchase JORN. I missed. I was wondering why so new. How this looks like a pull quote maybe from somewhere else in the article, but it is in fact maybe the next section. However, the interest in Australia's system is very, very new. Okay, so it's been a few years that Canada's been in the market for this. However, the interest in Australia's system is very, very new. So new, there we are, that when Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the deal to purchase JORN, many in the defense community were stunned. It is not something I've heard discussed in defense circles until virtually just ahead of the announcement, he said. Brewster believes with U.S. President Donald Trump imposing tariffs and proposing to annex Canada, JORN has one other major advantage. It's not American. I think one of the things that led to this decision, and it's seemingly coming out of nowhere, is the fact that the JORN system is operational, and it's proven, and it's also Australian, Brewster said. The purchase presented itself as a political opportunity for Canada to wean itself, or to not wean itself off of the U.S. defense industrial complex entirely, but certainly make a point, a political point. Next section, Canada is moving with urgency. Historically, Canada moves slowly when it comes to defense purchases, and it has taken so long to replace its F-18 fighter jets that in 2019 it bought used ones from Australia to fill the gap until new planes arrive. And there have been few details about how the JORN purchase will unfold, but Professor Monroe believes this time Canada intends to move much faster. It's very clear that Canada are moving, those British Commonwealth folks, clear that Canada are moving with urgency because they also have some really pressing needs to be able to surveil their northern reaches across the Arctic, she said. Climate change is impacting the Arctic region and ice coverage is receding. The vast waters of north of Canada are more accessible than ever to potential threats in boats anyway. The country recently said there was increased Russian and Chinese activity in Arctic waters. Brewster says Canada can't afford to wait on defense. The government needs to demonstrate not only that the United States, but to other major allies that it is taking the defense of its own territory seriously. He believes buying JORN from Australia does just that. Wow. So, yeah, that is an interesting and very subtle shift. It's not like they're buying their weapons from the Russians or anything, but just demonstrating for political effect that there are ways to, one, continue to meet commitments to NATO and other mutual defense. Two, it shouldn't, under normal circumstances, necessarily irritate the United States to buy from an ally. But, even presidents other than Trump would probably wonder, hey, well, why didn't we get the contract for this? Trump should know the answer. It's him, but he won't acknowledge the answer. So I don't know how effective a political message it is with actually getting him to change, but the rest of the world sees it and sees it pretty clearly. Very interesting and a good opportunity to call up old college-era Cold War knowledge of over-the-horizon backscatter radar. Haven't thought about that in quite a while. Probably won't do that again either for another 30-plus years.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That'll wrap it up for us today. Hope you enjoyed what we were able to put together for you in today's pre-recorded KITM. We will be back tomorrow with another one to keep you entertained, informed, and accompanied leading into Friday. For now, stay tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, right here on Netroots Radio.